With us today, our very own Jonathan Palmer, goes by JP.
People think they want money, really they want freedom, but the two tend to go hand in hand. I'd had actually this gardening business probably from the age of 8. I like digging holes.
The Keynesian economist in you.
Okay. A lame attempt at humor, swing and a miss.
This is what happened with Coinbase, isn't it? They outsourced the support to India. They stole how much money you had, your address, your phone number, national insurance number.
6% of all FT 100 companies had handed over money to a third party that was not the third party they thought. We are seeing the North Koreans trying to get jobs, certainly in the UK, where they're purporting to be someone else. Crypto guys being kidnapped. I think there's been 6 kidnappings in France last year. But unfortunately, from all the intelligence we get, in terms of organised crime and that kind of thing, that is heading to the UK. M&S, what happened to M&S is going to be a wake-up call. I think the loss is probably, it's over $1 billion.
Quick admin note from legal. None of this is investment advice. Please speak to a professional if you're looking for specific advice. This is all commentary on investing in AI. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 21 of the Mergers podcast. We recently reached 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, so thank you so much for the support. It means a lot. With me today, as ever, he's the pre-seed and seed B2B SaaS VC. He's a dyslexic's worst nightmare. Ken Thomas, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Summer in London, best time.
We've got a 30-degree heat wave coming, which is a little too much for me.
I was sweating on the way over here, so it's changing. Yeah.
Yeah. No one appreciates how hard it is to carry all this equipment around London. Behind the scenes, the hard work that goes on. With us today, our very own Jonathan Palmer, goes by JP. He's I'm going to call you the godfather of encryption, but I'm sure you'll push back on that. But you've done everything from commercializing encryption to working with the SAS. Thank you so much for coming on.
Not at all, Rory. Absolute pleasure to be here today. And great to meet you, Ken.
Likewise. Already had some great stories before the camera was rolling, so I'm excited to get it on the record.
Look, obviously it's your story to tell, but what got you into cyber, sort of like at the forefront of the industry?
I could see that, IT was a way of making money and having freedom. People think they want money, really they want freedom, but the two tend to go hand in hand. And so I went into the world. I did an H&D in computer studies at Sports College. Didn't learn much about computers in 2 years, but a lot learned about life. And then went out, did some work and tried to work for other people, which didn't really suit me. I found I was fairly unemployable. And so I set a business up. And the rest really goes on from there.
You saw you can make a bit of money in IT. I mean, I think I was being a bit understated, right? But I guess, being a bit long in the tooth, what was it like getting into IT at that point? What did the space look like?
There was, back in those days, if you understood it, a lot of opportunity. I was very young, but I have some contemporaries now that have built very, very, very large businesses. But because there was only a few options around, if you pick those options and actually just like a brokerage sold them over and over again, you would make a lot of money. I was probably 15 years too young to do that, but I know a lot of people who did just sell the same thing over, whether that's back in the day, something that was basically a networking box. Now Cisco owned that market. You may have heard of Cisco, biggest networking company in the world. But back in the day, there were a few companies that did that, and all you had to do is get in a relationship with them and sell it, or PCs, or Apple, heaven forbid, back in the day. So if you just sold something over and over again, you would do very well. But you kind of had to understand which one you were going to sell. Now, of course, in a way, the world has changed, and there was no cyber back in those days at all, really. And so, really, now you have a choice beyond your wildest dreams. And we have clients that have just come from outside of the technology world, said, hey, I've got a good idea about fintech. Suddenly, they have a fund of 2 billion that they're managing because the world has gone, I like your idea. I'm going to put the money into this and become a customer. Yeah. You couldn't do it because you didn't have any mechanism. You didn't have any way to have that relationship with your clients.
Did you have that kind of foresight when you got into it, or is it just something you said, we can make money here, but do you see how big it could possibly get from the future?
When I had my first company, I was 27 years old. I'm 56 now. And that was kind of a random set of events because I'd met these two guys through a mate of mine who had made a lot of money saying, call India for a pound. When it deregulated in the telco space from BT, they made millions saying, call for a pound. I'd made some money in property at that point in Notting Hill. And I met one of the guys. He had a house around the corner in Lambeth Grove. And I said, I'll do your house up for you, but can you write me a cheque? He goes, yeah, I've got lots of money. Write me a business plan. Now, being dyslexic, I didn't actually know what I had. So I borrowed his CFO, said, can you write me the business plan? This is what I want down on it. And that's what happened.
So that was the first, I was going to say the first business. What was that first step of being like, okay, no one's like taking a big bet on me. I'm going to bet on myself and go into like what was, a rapidly growing but niche, like early stage, I'm trying to think of the word, early stage industry.
Nascent, yeah.
Nascent, thank you.
Well, I think some of that's down to my father because I'd had actually this gardening business probably from the age of 8. I like digging holes and cutting lawns, right? So
the Keynesian economist in you.
Yeah, so from the age of 8 to about 14, 15, I had this business, which was actually doing very well. And because my dad, around the age of 16, 17, then made some money, he said, well, you need to go and do this. So he kind of pushed me in that direction. And it was a great direction to be pushed in hindsight.
Okay, and so tell us about this first business, because I've got some stuff here, but I don't know if you're going to want me to say all of it. But how it came about, because it's up to you how much you want to say.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. So I took some money off these two guys that remain nameless in telco. Great guys, and they taught me a lot. I mean, boy, they were fast on their feet in terms of being able to do deals and stuff. And I ended up in a basement, a company's called CI, in Putney, with a pasting table. That's all I had. I had a salesman called Fat Pete that I poached from somewhere. He wasn't actually fat, but we called him Fat Pete because he was kind of a bit stocky. And a fax machine. And I'd met these guys. I'd done some work for this little asset management company, and I'd met a chap who was running their IT asset management side of the business. And I was only there for about 3 months, and on my third day, the sales manager said, oh, go up to Preston with me. I'm going to show you how this is done. And what they were doing, you could scan, you put a floppy disk in, literally, you scanned the PC to see what was on it. It was coming up to the year 2000, so people were doing this. So caught the train up, 3.5 hours to Preston, went in this big office. The guy remained nameless. He went, spoke at this man. He had the biggest office in the world. And his name was Steve, and he said, right, shut up, stand outside my door. I went, oh dear. Me, he said, no, not you, John, him. I went, okay, it's going to be a very interesting conversation. And so he had to stand out his door. He said, right, you seem a sensible bloke. Hadn't said anything because I didn't know anything. He goes, what do you want to buy these licenses for? I went, okay. They were about £11. So I said, well, you wanted £3. I said, let's do it for £3.50. Longest journey back from Preston, it was 100,000 licenses, cash, and it was a small business, all up front. I said all up front. Longest journey.
All cash?
Yeah, all cash. Well, not cash, but a transfer. So, but that was for a small business turning over a couple of £1 million. That was a lot of money. Longest journey back with my sales manager. I thought I was going to get fired in the morning. MD came back and just went, shook my hand. I was there 3 months every day. He took me in the room, screamed at me, the sales manager. But I thought, this is good. So I left, right? I left. I'd got my money. I'd got the cheque had cleared. Had my basement. I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to do this cyber thing. I'm hearing about these companies called Baltimore and others. This is good. This is good stuff. And literally, I gave them a moratorium for 2 weeks. Said I wouldn't speak to anyone at this system integrator. And this guy's going crazy. Where is John? He's saying, he used to call me John. He said, where's John? Where's John? Couldn't get me. And at that point, they got acquired by this company, which is now HP. And literally, he was going nuts. He phoned the president off of what is now HP and said, where is he? I want this John fella to help me. And he phones up this little company. They were acquiring about 30 companies a month. It was insane. He goes, who's this person? They went, oh, that's Jonathan Palmer. And well, where is he? Because this guy's going nuts and we need this SI. And so they got me on the phone and they said, look, you can speak to him now. So I spoke to him. I said, right, what are you doing? Okay, well, I've left. I'm going to do this cybersecurity thing. He goes, no. You're going to come and count things for me. Which is a bit ironic when you're dyslexic, right? He goes, no, globally, we need to count this stuff. We need to count it because we need to bill it. Well, we're not billing it really well. So I said, okay, what are you going to give me? He said, I'm going to give you a £2 million purchase order. Now, bearing in mind, I've got a pacing table, I've got Fat Pete, and I have a fax machine, right? And that's all I had, no staff. So I went, okay, when am I going to get this? He said, well, give me your details. You'll have it as soon as you get the details of the system. And that's what happened. Literally, I remember it came through £2 million. I went, oh. So I went back to the old place I'd been for 3 months, and I bought all the staff curry, and I picked out the kind of 50 staff I needed. So that got me going on that side, and then we can come on to the cyber.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the products I got down here. You were like the what do you call it? Electronic data interchange, which I didn't understand, but you were you sold the mechanism for like fidelity to wire money, kind of.
So you're absolutely right. So what happened was randomly someone to get into cyber, but this asset management thing was globally. We're 123 countries we're in. It was insane. So that had to be put on the back burner. And then the two investors would send me to meetings they didn't want to go to. It might be Paris, it might be wherever. This time it was in Leeds. So I get on the train, I go up to Leeds, and I'm going around the real back end of Leeds. And I reach this old NatWest Bank. And in the basement, which was the old safe, these two guys are coming up the stairs. I go, I'm meant to be seeing you. They went, no, they had a check for 2.6. We just sold this basement. Shag pale carpets, 386 machines for 2.6. Do you want to come to the casino? And I went, don't think so. I don't gamble, you see. Can I make a cup of tea? Because I've got to get back on my train and go back, I guess. And so I was making my cup of tea, and I turned around, and there's two guys in the corner. I said, you all right? And they went, not really. We've just been fired. I said, well, what do you do then? They said, well, we can send things securely from A to B. And I went, this sounds really cool. What's it called? Encryption. So I went, oh, you're working for me now. Brought them down to London. And fundamentally what they did, and this will come on to the EDI stuff in a moment, is they were the pioneers in encryption as it is today. There was us and Baltimore, basically. So the kind of techniques you see today, these two guys actually invented. So we got another investor in, which gave us actually, was a software vendor of the people we're using for the IT asset management stuff. And we opened off into San Diego, one in New York, and we sold this stuff wholesale back to the American market, and the Americans never knew. When I had to go to a meeting, literally I'll go to the post office in just outside San Francisco, US Post Office. They'd say, sit there and you're not allowed to talk because it was US driven. So I was like, okay, this has got to be a US product. It's like, okay, whatever works for you guys. So to come into your point, where that comes from, as part of the investment, we ended up with a patent. So we acquired some technology from the investor for about $10 million US. And as part of that was a patent. We didn't even know. The lawyers are reading and said, they're giving you this patent. I said, oh, what's a patent? And I know you knew what it was, but I didn't understand the implication. He said, it's EDI over the internet. I go, okay. He said, do you know what that means? A lovely guy, I'll mention his name because he's a lovely guy, IP lawyer called Robert Porter. And he went, you know what this means? He said, you own the transactions go over the internet. That caused a bit of a stir. I'm not sure I'd ever have the money to be able to enforce that, but I ended up in the FT and on the radio because literally transactions that were happening. So people like Fidelity, everyone in the US, out of the Fortune 500, 60% used the EDI product we had.
But you accidentally acquired the patent for securely sending stuff over the internet.
Yes.
That's so wild.
I know, it was wild. The trouble was, by that point, I was about 29, maybe I was a little bit older. I was not equipped to kind of deal with what was coming next. Yeah. And I knew nothing about acquisitions. And I knew nothing really about what happens when you sell a business. And that's where I kind of learned the hard way, because our investors then said, look, I've got this other company, on paper you're now worth X number of hundreds of millions. I thought, well, that sounds brilliant. Well, of course, like a record deal, you get your upfront subscription, to go and make your records and stuff, but that doesn't mean that you're actually worth it. This was actually after the dot-com bubble had broken. But unfortunately, one of the mergers, the biggest company in the group, there was a bit of a falling out, which was an e-commerce company who unfortunately had very big links to organised crime. And there was a big falling out, and it turned out they wanted their company back overnight, and the whole lot collapsed.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask Ken on that. Is that something, you've obviously found that when you were selling this business when you were younger, but is that something that goes on in VC as well? I don't know, these like preferred share stacks or these like, I'm trying to think what they're called, like a right of certain returns. So like
liquidation preferences. Yeah, I mean, they're pretty standard. I mean, like when times are like hard, like .com post bubble, I mean, like you'll see some pretty nasty like pref stacks, so like liquidation preference, like 1x means you'll get your money back, right? And that's before anyone else. Then you have what preference share you have. But I mean, I've seen some nasty ones, 3, 4x. It could be, and then no one else gets money at that point. You know what I mean? So
that's the story to the founder selling company for 200 million and walking away with like 1 million each.
If that, sometimes.
If that.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Hey there, looking to level up your lifestyle between big meetings and bold moves? Loom Club's your place for that. Located in Islington and Hackney, it's a great social club with a lot of events, big wellness scene. They've hosted everyone from TikTok to Deloitte. The reviews are great. Highly recommend you coming through. And they're also one of the sponsors of this today's episode. Try Loom for yourself for a 2-week experience for the price of a cinema ticket. Quote the mergers on the website for insider welcome. You can check them out at loom.club, or you can catch them at loom.club on Instagram.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of my contemporaries at the time that I still know after 30 years. I was not in a dissimilar situation that, maybe things have matured a bit. All I'd say is have 2 sets of accountants, 2 sets of lawyers, 2 sets of everything, because we also had a bit of a local difficulty with our US lawyer in North Carolina that took a shine to one of the staff, which was then complicit in his advice. So, you need people to bounce things off. So don't be reliant on one professional set of advisors when it comes to actually advising you if you're selling your company, or indeed setting it up to a degree.
Unless you're looking for a wealth manager, in which case you just need...
Yes, well, that's different, isn't it? Because you should have their back, Rory.
Yeah.
So you should be looking after their wealth and where it's going and what's happening. And you'll be one step removed from, the transactional side of their business.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with the lawyers. They'll play Pong, who has the highest score of billable hours for that transaction.
Yeah, the lawyer incentive of billables is, I understand it, but sometimes I'm like, this cannot be the most efficient way.
Yeah.
So let's move on, and it's up to you where you want to take it from here. Obviously, you do some pretty interesting work now, sort of combining like dark web intelligence with guys at Hereford for like physical security, or we can maybe talk about, obviously being a finance podcast, sort of should there be a role in terms of like a cybersecurity audit for a private equity firm buying a company? Like, why is it not taken more seriously given all the corporate, Victoria's Secret, M&S, that have basically businesses have ground to a halt?
It's very good questions. Let's start, I think, the first of your questions, because that will set the scene. So I've been involved in one shape or another for 20 odd years in child protection. Now, what people don't appreciate that cyber crime is not victimless. So it is all organised crime, or it's state actor sponsored. So what we're seeing at the moment is the Russians are putting hundreds of millions into organised crime, especially in the UK, to disrupt the UK, right? These organised crime families build a triangle between themselves. At the bottom, you've got drugs. The next level up, you've got cybercrime. Then you go into human trafficking. Then you go into paedophilia, believe it or not. And then you get to some more things. That means, on the whole, that when you lose data, and what we do as a company is we monitor the dark web for organisations and some family offices and some individuals. And what we do is we tell you what's there on the dark web on you and what data have you lost. So a bit like insurance. There are access brokers there on the dark web, and they trade your information for money. That is organised crime, and that is being funding. And to put it into context, if cyber crime was a state nation, it would be the third largest nation on the planet.
Jeez. So what's behind US and China?
Yes, that is how big this issue is. And people don't realise they still have there's two views we hear. We don't hear so much, I've got and it's always, always a man, an IT man to do this. That kind of went 5 years ago, but you can see in their eyes when you sometimes ask senior guys, we can help. They say, we've got people to do this. A very, very famous household name through a contact in a retailer said that to my contact 8 weeks ago. And they're one that's been done recently. He said, no, we've got people to do that. And then my friend wrote back, knew the CEO, went, well, you probably should have spoken to me. That's like me. It's like he just doesn't know. But, not joking aside, this is serious. So, these actors are very, very streetwise, right? So you go back to my mantra, which is basically, I say to everyone, you've got to think like a criminal, act like an angel, yeah? As an organisation, you're not there. You're not there to be streetwise. You're not there to make people like that, because that has a knock-on effect that you may not like. We are there to do that for you, right? Because if you take M&S, for example, M&S completely taken out. First FT100 to be taken out as an organisation completely.
And when you say taken out, you mean they got hacked? I think you're talking about they got hacked so much they had to do inventory and stock take on pen and paper.
Well, again, Rory, let's just rewind to what happened. We are an intelligence-based company. There's a reason for that. If you have the intelligence, then you can kind of see what's coming over the hill. In the case, and we are unique because we can actually see dark web traffic hitting your external kind of public-facing stuff like your websites and stuff. That's a kind of like a drive-by. They're just checking out to see what's there. We can also see dark web traffic coming out. If that happens, that's bad. And we do see that. We probably do 10 demos a week, and one of those we will see something very adverse, right? But in the case of Marks and Spencer's, it was simple. I feel very sorry for them and the people there, but they did some intelligence work, and they're very good at it for 6 months. They were probably in there for 6 weeks, allegedly. And because they just asked someone for the passwords, they'd asked a third-party supplier, What's the main password? The admin password. They got it.
Yeah.
That's not sophisticated, is it? That's being streetwise.
We laugh and say that this phishing stuff is so ridiculous. Why does everyone? But people fall for it. People fall for the most benign probings.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you think about an email. We ask people to open emails, and yet we tell them not to open them if they're bad. Yeah. And human nature is human nature. And you're seeing the attacks, certainly over the last couple of months, have all been intelligence-based led. Yeah. They're not sophisticated in terms of their actual approach to hacking in. They always come through a third party, because guess what? A third party is normally weaker than obviously a bank or Marks and Spencer's would be. So they come through, in this case, their third party IT supplier allegedly, and they're in.
This is what happened with Coinbase, isn't it? They outsourced the support to India, and the hackers basically saw that as a weakness because maybe they weren't as well trained or whatever, and they stole 1 in 5 client data. So how much money you had, your address, your phone number, national insurance number. That's the sort of thing you're referring to, right? Using these external vendors as a route in.
Third parties always the weakest link. I mean, you've got things like Dora that a lot of the European banks are still struggling with, I believe, where you're meant to know who you're dealing with, as a third party perspective. Yeah, Dora.
Is that like KYC?
Yeah, it's compliance across all European banks are having to go for Dora. So, and you're meant to know your third parties, and that's one of the reasons, really. People don't know their third parties. Banks don't know their third parties because there's so many of them. Right. And the interconnection, it goes back to my original company I had. What we were doing, was going around scanning PCs, scanning servers. Do you know what you got? Right. If you don't intelligence is not just about actually knowing what's on the dark web. We go far beyond that, right? We do investigations. We look after a company that literally the head of security phoned me up and said in 5 minutes the CEO is going to phone. Huge company. Oh, wow, okay, I'm honoured. And I thought this is going to be interesting. And said, look, they're a medical research company. We've had an issue that we've been told by the national press that we've been infiltrated by a certain group, and we've got to let them know by Friday they're going to publish at the weekend. So we managed to prove that this group knew a lot about the subject, but were not neo-Nazis in this case, just crackpots, right? So we do investigations as well, because companies are now getting threats, and we're coming on to our work down in Hereford with the ex-Special Forces guys. It's moving. The target is moving now from what was online to coming online in a hybrid solution where, for criminals, where you're actually getting to a point where they're actually targeting families, the CEOs now, and they're, in certain cases, phoning them up. Or worse, they're now calling France mini Mexico, which is, I think, what you alluded to,
Little
in terms of
Mexico,
the crypto guys being kidnapped. And I think there's been 6 kidnappings in France the last year. But unfortunately, from all the intelligence we get in terms of organised crime and that kind of thing, that is heading to the UK, because a lot of money is being put in by, state actors like Russia to organised crime, and the organised crime figures don't know who they're dealing. They just know there's a lot of money to go and do a job, basically, and that's what they're doing.
And so, if I was worth like 500 million, some of your clients would basically employ you to be like, can you monitor what is me and my family at risk? Can you?
Yeah, so but a bit like you've got third-party suppliers for customers, yeah? It's the same with families. So what we do for senior leadership teams, not just in finance, but everywhere, although finance is obviously a big risk factor in terms of their families, we look at the families, we look at members, we look at, brothers, sisters, every connection they've got to them, and how an organised crime person or a criminal would get to them. For example, locking down their social media, so it's their friends and family that can see it, not everyone. If you're going to Vegas, for example, don't put you're going to Vegas and you're on your own if you're in finance, and you want to meet people, because if you're in a high-risk area, then that might not be so good. So you're going to Vegas, to your friends, to your mutual connections. And making sure that their families are as safe as they are, really, because in the case of someone worth 500 million, they will have some sort of close protection. They will have, things in place. But the online thing is so benign, isn't it? You can't see it. We're sitting here. We could have put out anything last week. We could have gone down the wine bar, put something out at midnight, forgot about it, and then suddenly it exposes us and our families to unnecessary risk.
Onto the SAS guys, this is what you're now saying, it blends from digital to physical. So you do cyber security monitoring alongside, physical training.
Yeah, so what's really interesting, we run courses down in Hereford, but it can be anywhere. The prime one, the one I like best, although I've only seen a day or two of it, and they haven't actually put me in the boot of a car, is how not to get kidnapped. Yeah, and if you are kidnapped, what do you have to do? What's really interesting is, and we put our clients through, things like how to undo tape, different types of techniques, believe it or not. What happens if someone bashes in your door and wants to attack you in whatever shape or form? How do you avoid it? And the biggest one is first aid, because the chances are, as a senior exec, you're probably more likely to be in a car crash and needing to know what to do in a lot of foreign countries than you're going to get kidnapped. However, we do work with clients that have been very close, trading relationships with organisations where the CEO have been kidnapped. So it's a very serious matter. The best advice I can give you, and I know I'm slightly rotund, is learn how to run really fast. So don't get kidnapped. But we have to do that. And it's a very sad state of events. 6 months ago, before, the whole French thing blew up and, organised crime started to get an idea, this is quite an interesting way of dealing with people. We didn't have to do this. We weren't running these types of courses. But now it's changing. And I was in a briefing, Chatham House Rules. And, the summary takeaway is that in the UK, it's going to get very tricky in the next year or two. For a number of reasons. One, the geopolitical stuff, and again, I keep harking on about our Russian friends putting money into organised crime to destabilise it. But generally, fake news and what is real, we've already had a taster of that in terms of putting fake news about various stories and watching the damage it does and the riots that happen. And unfortunately, we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's already bad enough with AI and it's funny, you see VO3 that's recently come out, and this is something that's I had a hard time. There's some stand-up videos they had. I had a hard time telling the difference between the stand-up and the actual real person.
Who's VO3? Sorry,
it's a new just basically model they have that does new video editing from a prompt. So its stuff is really good, and you even had in Hong Kong a while back. This before even AI was really good, where they got 200 million they got out of the bank, because then they have four different people that worked in the bank, but they were all AI. They used voice modulators on it. So yeah, it's pretty nuts. And then let alone having to worry about getting your phone snatched on the streets of London.
Well, there is that, of course, as well. Yeah. Well, it's a really interesting point, because we're not dealing with crime very well, and the police will tell you this, and we work closely with the police. The nature of crime has changed, and police forces are not set up in a way to manage that. Normally you have a criminal, you have a victim, and you have a situation. That has kind of changed, and they're being overwhelmed by things exactly what you said, which is, petty things that actually are not so petty when you can steal enough of them, like phones, for example. And I think, Rory, we've touched on this before in terms of county lines.
Yeah.
County lines was a great pathfinder for organised crime to work out how far they could push the police. And it turns out that they could push them very far, because county lines means that every police force looks after its area. You've got the National Crime Agency above it. And suddenly you could very successfully go from somewhere to somewhere, to do a criminal transaction, and then walk back, and 9 times out of 10, you'd be okay. Now, what if you can do that in other areas of criminality?
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. I mean, in the States, we have the golden age of the high-speed chase, right? There's a lot of times where you have these different organizations communicating, say, cool, they're crossing into your jurisdiction, so that they kind of tail off. But it's if the communication lines weren't solid, they're gone.
They're gone, absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of that at the minute. And, we're seeing the police at the moment, sadly, are overwhelmed. They probably feel very devalued in many cases. There's some exceptionally good police officers. But, you have to have the correct leadership that understands the issues they're facing, which, is slightly debatable at the minute. And, you then have to have the will to deal with this. And at the moment, it's whose responsibility is it? And I have to defend the police here and say, if I was running, any kind of legislation at the moment, I would have, and I know this legislation potentially coming in this year around cyber for companies, I would insist on a cyber boot camp for senior execs, where they go on to understand in detail what the risks are. Don't understand the technology, this is where the confusion comes, understand the risks.
And I guess aside from the petty to major crime of phone theft, we had kind of touched on AI there a bit. So how is that kind of affecting the work that you do, the preparation that you guys have? Because obviously this is something that's rapidly changing, let alone, whether it's a DDoS attack trying to get into someone's digital information, let alone, impersonations and things of that nature.
Yeah, impersonations are a massive problem at the moment. I think the FT did basically a study about a year ago now, where they said 6% of all FT 100 companies had handed over money at the top to a third party that was not the third party they thought, which is a huge number. We are seeing the North Koreans trying to get jobs, pretending important in technology, certainly in the UK and the US, where they're purporting to be someone else. And so what happens when you turn up to meetings now? Who do you trust?
Someone got arrested for that recently, selling their identity to
Yeah.
a North Korean. Yeah,
Really?
so they get a job. Yeah.
Yeah. It's we if we know about it, then it must be happening a lot more than we can see. So yeah.
How do you go about solving that? Just a sort of like a US style, like nationwide ban on, certain roles being held by national citizens.
But they're not coming in as nationals. They're coming in as that's like if I sold or you sold your identity to someone in North Korea, they would be applying for and interviewing for a job as Rory Mason.
Oh, geez. Okay, yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, and that's the issue. and who do you trust? That's the thing. I mean, obviously, we touched on India. India will probably be decimated in terms of the kind of manual types of tech work when AI really gets going.
Yeah, this is a really good point that you were telling me about earlier.
Yeah, and what are you going to do with a mass population that is now unemployed? So there's some big social issues. And would you, if you are as an organised crime gang, would I go and get them and turn them to work? I mean, there's some pretty horrible stories as well in certain parts of the world where people are kidnapped and work in basically battery farms to rip people off.
Yeah, it was the pig butchers.
Yes. Yeah. So, what's going to happen there? It's going to be really interesting, well, for the wrong reasons. And AI in general is going to be a massive problem, because if we haven't kind of running with a grass and rugby ball, it's been thrown at us, we're running with it. If we can't do that at this stage, what are we going to do when you've got 3 or 4 coming at you? And some of them aren't even real, but you've got to catch them all.
Is there I'm always a bit cynical with regulators and their ability to stay one step ahead. Is there any hope that the regulator sort of gets a grip and gets ahead of AI, or is it just
I don't even think the developers have a good grasp of the rate we're going at right now, let alone the regulators.
Yeah, it's the same in policing, right? So if you're, someone who is very IT literate, quite frankly young, they can't go to a chief constable and say this is what you're meant to be doing, because there's lots of layers they would have to go through. And this is the kind of thing policing and law enforcement is struggling with. You've got the security services going after the big guys, and now the actual bar has to be quite high, allegedly, for them to actually, go after them. And so, what do you do? So you see, from my understanding, you guys are probably better equipped at this. The regulator gives you a set of rules and won't be tired if you don't follow them into the manner you're told. From what I can see in terms of regulation, certainly for the finance markets, they don't go to you, you have to do X, Y, Z. You have to interpret them. So they're kind of passing the buck back to the organisation. So in a way, the organisation needs to look after themselves because they can't rely on the regulator to do that for them.
And on a similar note to this, something we touched on earlier, I know you said that you had been to some like private equity companies and sort of pitched in a way this idea of like, let me take a look at this company you might be buying. Yeah. Why, you said that effectively they were like, yeah, we see your point, but no. Is it just this commercial interest wins out and, people want to pursue AI because they don't want to get left behind, or they don't want to lose a deal due to cyber? Do you think that's the bottleneck, is that money comes ahead of the sort of cyber due diligence?
That's a really interesting question, Rory. I'm not sure I've got the answer, but I can give you some anecdotes to why that might be. Now, for many years, I was the funeral undertaker of the technology world, right? So no one wanted to speak to me because it's not going to be good news and there's going to be cost and they're going to think it's technical, right? So I think that stigma still goes on. I think also in technology generally, and I think the quarterly reporting has a massive, you put massive blame at that quarterly reporting, is that because the sales are being driven all the time, very hard to sell in that quarter, sometimes, and a lot of times, organisations get what they don't need or desire. So it's kind of got a bad name. That's the problem. You can't blame the leadership teams at the top, really, because technology as a whole has not done the best service to these people over the years. Some phenomenal successes, great stuff, but equally, if they don't, it all comes down to trust. So if they don't trust an industry to look and serve and protect them, who are they going to believe? They're probably going to go, we will try and do this deal. Let's see how we get on.
I mean, it feels a bit like a dereliction of duty, though. If you're a PE fund allocating capital for investors, and you're sort of skipping the cyber due diligence. I'm just playing the other side of it.
So they will do, typically what will happen in any due diligence exercise, there will be a massive questionnaire, right?
Yeah.
So it's not self-certification, but a bit like an audit. So a bit like accountancy audit. You're expected to supply some information based on a questionnaire, and that questionnaire is there to serve the tick in the box exercise and do that, right? Trouble is, what happens is it's either a point of time, generally, or you don't get the evidential information you need. So there is something to be said to say, actually, there are some checks and balances we can quickly do on an organisation to give a correct view on what they are. Because I think they have a kind of questionnaire approach to a lot of this due diligence that's done, they're sticking at that. But, yeah, I think M&S, what happened to M&S is going to be a wake-up call because those are big numbers involved in FT100. Yeah, I think the loss is probably, it's over $1 billion at the moment, Rory, so I think the figure will be, probably another half a billion by the time they probably finish up.
Sobering.
Yeah, no, it is, Rory. But then if you look at the litany over the last 10 years, certainly for PLCs, these figures are big. And one anecdote I'll give you, though, which is a very cautionary tale because they are now a case study for every cybersecurity student, is the board spoke to the cybersecurity head of cybersecurity and said, how much is this going to fix our company? It was an FT100 company. And they said, it's going to cost about 100 million to fix all this stuff to make us, protect us. So they went, okay, we can hedge this. You can't hedge it when it happens 5 times to you. So a cautionary tale for everyone listening is that when the criminals get a taste for your organisation, they will come back.
I guess it's interesting mentioning that the price of that cost to fix everything. Obviously, I see a lot of early pre-seed and seed early startup companies who want to sell cyber to, enterprise. I guess for founders that are kind of like new in that space or new selling enterprise, what is any advice you might give either from the procurement process, building their cybersecurity, with things they should be looking at, how they're talking to these executives and really understanding the problems that they're solving?
Fantastic question. Do a lot in innovation at the moment. We're always looking for new innovation. We've got some great stuff going on, which very quickly gives positions on, for boards and for cybersecurity professionals. So there are kind of 4 things there. The first is there must be a need, and it must be an absolute need. Yeah. It can't be nice to have, because in this market, believe it or not, it's very hard to sell. Second thing is you need to communicate your message. If you can get to the top person, I would go to the top and then work your way down, which is easier than it sounds when they're really worried about the situation they're in. And then you need to have some flexibility so you take them on a journey. And what I mean by that is set an advisory board of the good and the great in cyber, and then have your own group. You say, well, we really would like to develop our product. Go to some CISOs that are prevalent, and they'd love to help normally. And say, look, we really want to go on this journey, but we need your help because it has to be relevant. So, and the 4th thing is, don't develop your product in isolation. So make sure that you're actually working with the industry, the customers that you're selling to or want to sell to, because I see probably 70% of all products, someone's had a brilliant idea, but they've not gone to the market and said, actually, does the market actually need this? And do they need it in the way I'm actually progressing the development of?
He's basically a VC now. You need to. Those are a lot of the same things we look for as well. And I guess obviously that 4th point being close to the customer. That 2nd point, storytelling is something we really look at. But I guess in a space like this, highly specialized, highly specific. How do you go about finding that painkiller that's not a vitamin, like that actual need? Because you might see a one-off, but like, how do you know it's a real problem?
Has there ever been market demand So we're doing at the one at the moment. It's called Attack Surface Management. Got a brilliant product, being acquired from Australia by a company called Searchlight. Brilliant product. No marketing in Australia, no salespeople. That's disgusting, but they managed to sell to household names in the US, not having any of that. And the reason they did that is it was set up, one of the co-founders was one of the number one bug bounty hunter in the Australia. So what they said to him, can you put your brain in a box? Because we're paying you millions, can you do it? And that's what they did. So whilst there's other stuff that does what they do, I'd call it, they are kind of like third generation. I say that these guys have invented the Hoover when you've got a dustpan and brush. So what you want to do is parallel what's happening in the market. So go for something really successful and make it better. The other thing is a lot of these big companies in cyber acquire and nothing really fits. So, and it's very frustrating for the customers because when they're trying to use this stuff, a lot of this has been acquired. So they bolted together, but nothing quite fits. They've used the wrong bolts to put everything together. So if you can come and streamline that process and go, I can do this for you, which is what ASM product Asset Note's done.
And that point solution tech stack then itself becomes a risk, does it not?
It does, yeah.
And we're back where it started.
Well,
sounds like a VC to back the disruptor of the disruptor.
Yeah, well, the interesting, I tell you what, and I don't want to forbear on CrowdStrike, but we had some clients at the F1 in Hungary when that broke. And I was getting a lot of resistance to some of the stuff we were doing. Say, we got CrowdStrike for this. As soon as that blew up, a lot of doors open that were never open before. So you're absolutely right. If you do put all your eggs in one basket,
it's a valuable basket to go after.
Well, it's a disruptor, isn't it? And it could just be a random set of events that take it out if you've got nothing else. You're meant to banks layer stuff like an onion. They're not stupid. But a lot of companies go, well, it's easy. If I just buy this one thing from Microsoft, I just buy everything. A bit like Cisco. Cisco, I get it. I get Cisco because it's networking. They do really good networking stuff. But then you go, well, I've got Cisco, so I'm just going to buy everything from Cisco. Why not?
So you mean Microsoft Defender is not enough for enterprise security?
Well,
$19.99 a month is good for the shareholder.
Yeah. You just overlay it with stuff.
JP, that seems like a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Rory, and a real pleasure to meet you, Ken.
Likewise, thanks for coming on and joining us.
Thank you.
And if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. More episodes coming to you. We've got some really good guests coming on, so please stay tuned.